Good evening, everyone. Today is Monday, September 19, 2011. We have a special posting of the colors by our Explorer Scouts, Chief Neubauer. If we could all please rise for the flag posting.
Present arms.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order. Arms. Recover.
A round of applause for our Elmhurst Police Explorers. And to make this meeting official, Clerk Spencer, if you could please call the roll.
Pezza. Here. Butenkoff. Absent. Leader.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Polumsky. Here. York. Absent. Hipskin.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
Levin.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Morley.
Here.
Wagner.
Here.
Mulliner.
Here.
12 present, 2 absent.
12 present, 2 absent. We have an official quorum. First on the agenda is recognition of the Elmhurst Police Explorers, and recognizing our explorers is our Chief of Police, Chief Neubauer. Chief, take it away, sir.
Well, thank you, and thanks for the opportunity for us to showcase our Explorer Scout Unit. Police Department sponsors an Explorer Scout Unit. We have about 20 young people, high school age up to 21, who want to learn about law enforcement and learn about character and learn about just being good citizens. Brett Kazarowski, he's one of our police officers, is the leader from the Police Department. His wife, Patty, come on up, Patty. Patty's a police officer in Palatine, and Palatine graciously allows her to work with our Explorers, too. Last month, they went to a statewide competition amongst Explorer groups throughout the state in Springfield, and as you could tell by the sharp way they presented the colors, they won a few trophies, and we'd like to introduce those people who were there. And I'll take it away to Brett. He can tell you what they did and what the trophies are for. All yours, sir.
Thank you, sir. The trophies this year, the Explorer Scouts ended up going to the state competition down in Springfield. They competed against about 300 other police explorers from all around the state of Illinois and competed against 75 other individual teams and individual posts from other towns. They competed in a total of 9 events, and they were able to take home trophies in 8 of those events out of competing against 75 other teams. So needless to say, it was a very exceptional job that the Explorers did this year representing Elmhurst, and we're all very, very proud of them. So we have 4 members here from our competition team today. If you guys can come up when I announce your name: Akash Rajput, Tim Griffin, Joe Harding, and Brian O'Leary. Like I said, they were able to compete against all kinds of different events. They were able to win first place trophies in drill and ceremony, bomb scene, building search, and crime scene. They won second place trophies in evidence technician duties, accident investigation, and then they also won third place trophies in basically a shoot, no shoot FATS scenario and an obstacle course, which is a team building physical competition. Additionally, Joe Harding won second place throughout all 300 explorers there, and he got second place in physical fitness through the power test, which is the test that police officers do prior to joining the police force to make sure that they're in physical fitness and ready to prepare for the academy. So congratulations, guys. You guys did really good job.
A couple other things they do. Brett makes all of them go through the Live at 25 program, which is a driver's ed program that talks about decision-making and driving, which is a program we promote, and it's a great thing for them to do. So it's part of an educational portion of the program. And the other thing is they volunteer at city events. They help us with the turkey trot and the Memorial Day parade and events around town with directing traffic and things like that. So it's a great group of young people who do wonderful things for the community. They did wonderful things for their team building. Thought you'd like to meet them, so I'm going to have them come around and meet all of you. And thanks for letting us showcase this fine program.
Thank
Come
you,
on through.
Chief.
Oh, yeah, happens all the time.
We always get, we're used to it. Go up there and ignore us.
Yeah,
At least you come through here, yeah.
Thank you, Chief, and to the young men that are our Elmhurst Police Explorers. We appreciate all your hard work, your volunteerism, and congratulations on the awards. Obviously, as the trophies speak for themselves here, so great job, guys. Wow. All right. At this time, I'll go on to the next portion of our meeting, which is receipt of written communications and or petitions from the public. At this time, is there anyone with any written communications or petitions? Please stand and rise, as Kathy just did, and present those to Clerk Spencer. Thank you. Anyone else? I will now go on to the public forum portion of our meeting, where any Elmhurst resident has up to 3 minutes to speak on any Elmhurst issue. Clerk Spencer, is anyone signed up today yet for public forum?
Yes, we have 2 tonight. Claude Pagash, 566 West Gladys.
Mr. Pakash.
Claude Pogage, 566 West Gladys. I'm here to make commentary about the last couple meetings. It starts out with Mr. Healy indicating he has a private letter to send. And he asked the alderman to sign it. The alderman then debate it. Whoever signs it, signs it. Some of the aldermen hesitate, Ms. Peasant, Mr. Bram. Then we come down to the next meeting. There's Mr. Morley. He has a letter. In my opinion, those are private letters, gentlemen. They are your opinion. They never went through committee. They never had public debate. And what you did was you presented them as documents you wrote. I may very well agree with what you wrote. I may be happy that you wrote them. But you all were elected to follow a set of rules that you may or may not agree with. And I've heard all of you bring up rules Robert's Rules of Order says this. The rules of this council say that. And therefore, council member, you cannot bring up the subject, nor will we discuss it. But this was a special case. Mr. Morley even admits that he will bring up Robert's Rules of Order on a regular basis. So is Mr. Healy. So is Mr. Levin. But you've opened the door, gentlemen, and set a precedent. You cannot turn around now when some other alderman says, I've got a special set of circumstances. I would like to write a letter. I would like it to be discussed now. I would like your signatures on it. Because how do you then stand? That we have to enforce the Robert Rules of Order? That we have to follow the rules of the council? You can't have it both ways. Your ideas may be great, but there are a lot of things on the agenda that are debated by council. And then when they're brought up here and they've had a public hearing, I don't particularly care what you say. But when you want your private letter signed by the alderman and use the dais,
Claude, if you could wrap it up in about 10 seconds.
then
that'd be great.
it isn't right. And you have no right to bring up Robert Rules of Order all over again.
Thank you, Claude.
Kathleen Sullivan, 133 Pine Street.
Kathleen Sullivan, 133 Pine Street. Good evening. Water is life was one of is the theme of the DC Water Authority, and it was one of the themes of a presentation by the Center for Neighborhood Technology that I attended recently. And they do a lot of things. They're doing a whole project on water, and they had a lot of interesting points to make from a leadership standpoint. One is that every square inch counts. And right after hearing a lot of their information, I noticed one thing that also at the last meeting, City Manager Grabowski asked for budget proposals. And I saw one thing here, and thinking about how every inch counts, thought about a proposal, which is the City Hall parking lot. It's been patched over a couple of times already. Even though I feel like this is a new City Hall because I've lived here so long, it might be about time to look at the parking lot and maybe put in a pervious surface and take a leadership role in showing the citizens of Elmhurst how you feel about stormwater management. So I'm proposing that you take a look at that. Some of the types even require less salt because they provide more drainage. And so it would help reduce some of your maintenance costs for said parking lot. So I thought that'd be a great idea. And if you're doing that, maybe do a little rain gardening up here in the plaza. So I submitted my budget proposal tonight. Additionally, I saw that there were the 3 TIFs being discussed tonight, and the one that I, of course, have a little bit of an issue is the one that's on Riverside Drive, given that it's near the creek and possibly in floodplain. And so I would really like you to make sure you give strong consideration to that because there is some vacant land over there. And so it might be something that could be useful to you as you address the stormwater issues that we're talking about. And so I just wanted to make sure that we considered those things as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen.
That concludes public forum.
All right. I will close the public forum portion of our meeting and go on to the consent agenda. At this time, is there anyone that has a question or may want to vote no on any particular item? Please indicate that now. Alderman Brown.
Item K.
Item K. Okay, anybody else? Hearing none, I'd ask for a motion and a second to approve the contents of the consent agenda, less item K. Alderman Wagner with a motion, second by Alderman Dunn. And Clerk Spencer, if you can please call the roll.
Wagner.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Polumsky. Aye. York. Absent. Hipskin.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Morley.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Heza. Aye. Gutenkopf. Absent. Leader.
Aye.
12 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent.
12 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent. The consent agenda passes in its entirety, less item number, less item K. And as I get tongue-tied here, I'd ask for Clerk Spencer, if you could please read the Recommendation, item K, please.
Therefore, it is the recommendation of the Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee to support and fund the Shop by Elmhurst campaign. The city attorney is hereby directed to prepare the necessary documents for city council approval. Respectfully submitted by Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee, Stephen Morley, Chairman, Danny Polumsky, Vice Chair, Norman Leader, Alderman, 2nd Ward.
And before I ask for a motion and a second on this, I just would like to say that the mayor and I believe the whole entire city council is all for shopping local. This is looking to partner with our Chamber of Commerce to help us bring this along. It was recommended by the Business Alliance and recommended by committee. So I would hope that everyone would support this. Chairman Morley, would you entertain making a motion, please, on this? And I'd ask for a second. Alderman Polumsky. Chairman Morley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this is a kind of a continuation of the shop by theme that we've been discussing for quite some time. In fact, you even mentioned it in the State of the City. It's truly a City of Elmhurst marketing campaign that's being executed on our behalf by the Elmhurst Chamber of Commerce. This marketing campaign really started out actually as an idea way back December 15th, 2009. Went through several iterations, Mr. Quigley driving it with a lot of help from city staff. We got very close actually last year in August of 2010, but as you'll all recall, after the flood events, we decided to concentrate on that, and the city manager recommended that we shelf this at least until we had the appropriate amount of time and effort to put behind this. Like I said, this is a marketing campaign that's it's a pro-Elmhurst, Elmhurst business marketing campaign that has the shop by theme. It's gone through several iterations. I think it's on number 4 or number 5 right now. Mr. Quigley has worked with the EEDC, city staff, Mr. Kopp, the Elmhurst Chamber of Commerce, the EEDC and the Elmhurst Chamber of Commerce, including within the Elmhurst Chamber of Commerce, the marketing committee, and the board itself, with assistance also from Fines All Marketing. Like I said, originally there was budgeted for last year, but because of events, it got put off. We were given a little bit of an update prior to City Manager Borchardt's departure on April 6th. He sent a memo to Mayor DeCiani and members of the City Council. Status of certain economic developments. Number 3 on that list was the under City Manager's authority, they were going to get started to get some of the logo and artwork started, and they've done that. We had 2 or 3 different meetings about this at the committee level. I did miss one committee meeting, and then arranged to have a separate meeting with Mike Kopp and John Quigley, and they walked me through what the plan was. Took about a half hour, 45 minutes. But ultimately, we feel that this shows loyalty that the city has to the businesses that are in town. It also shows that any businesses that are considering relocating in Elmhurst, that Elmhurst is a pro-business community, and I hope you'll support this effort, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Any other discussion?
Yeah.
Alderman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I want to point out, as the mayor already stated, that I agree that marketing and making sure we shop and buy in Elmhurst is very important. I just have a few questions on the report itself. And Alderman Morley already, I think, answered one of the questions. So, as the report states, $25,000 was allocated in the previous fiscal year. $25,000 is currently allocated to the current fiscal year. In the previous fiscal year, $0 were spent, and I just want to confirm that from the committee. So my follow-up question to that is, does that mean that even though that this current budget, which currently has $25,000 allocated, we're giving authority via this report to spend $50,000 for this fiscal year. My secondary question would be, and it's alluded to in this report itself, I want to make sure that we have appropriate checks and balances and get frequent status reports on what is happening here, due to the fact that we did have other priorities in the past couple of years, being flooding, being other items, tight budget, et cetera. I know that in the third ward was impacted in regards to cutting back some budget items as well in the last 2 years. So it's very important to me to note and understand on a frequent basis, albeit monthly or some time frame certain, on how these funds are being spent. Are some of these funds going to be allocated to work that has already been done, or only for future work in the remaining of this fiscal year?
Chairman Morley?
Yes, good questions. What happened was, if you looked at the budget we voted on last year, there was actually $25,000 in for last year, and then you know how we get a projected column that says what's going to be in for next year in the budget? There was $25,000 allocated there as well. So that's the $50,000 total. When none of it was spent in 2009-10, what we did is we added budgeted numbers that had previously been approved and not spent into 2011. Is that correct, Mr. Kopp? So the line item actually that we approved in the most recent budget in end of April, had $50,000 in it. So that line item had $50,000. This is for $50,000. Like I said, just because of some scheduling and some timing issues, the city manager gave him a little bit of leeway to spend $5,000 on some artwork development, et cetera. But that's part of their $50,000 plan. So it's in the budget, and they're going to spend to that budget. I will say this, that Mr. Quigley has committed on countless occasions as they go through and they develop this marketing plan. They're continuing to develop it and tweak it, and what they're really doing is they're looking for where to get most bang for their buck. So they looked into advertising on Comcast, and that would blow the budget in one buy. But if there's other pro-Elmhurst or other Elmhurst items that are being distributed into the community, for example, the Elmhurst Community Directory, instead of paying postage for this marketing campaign to alert everybody in town what we're doing, we actually were able to secure the inside flap of that. So stuff like that. So it's a little bit of a fluid process. I will say this, Mr. Quigley, every step of the way has been working with Mike Kopp on almost all of this stuff. And he did commit, because we did present to us, the farther out we got in this projection, well, we might do this, we might do that. And it's a good question, to be updated. He has, for the past year and a half, kept Mike Kopp updated almost on a weekly basis. I mean, I certainly think that we can pass this report as is. I would recommend we do so, and then we ask Mike Kopp or John Quigley to give us whatever updates we want, whether it be monthly or every other month. I don't think that's a problem, because that was committed to verbally.
Alderman Brown.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Morley. That does answer most of my questions. My request would be we, the sitting aldermen, elected officials, do get a monthly report from all the departments within the city of Elmhurst. If this would be part of maybe the EEDC report, that way everybody would have insight on what is going on with this effort by all of these entities within the Elmhurst government. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion, questions? Alderman Pezza.
Thank you. I agree this is very important that we send a message not only to our chamber members, but to anyone that actually has a business in this town, or would think about moving a business into this town, that we support them, we want to help them advertise, we'd like to promote them. So that in itself, I think, is worth the dollars. I just want to be sure, and Alderman Morley did reiterate this for me earlier today, that make it clear that 100% of these funds will be used toward marketing purposes. It's not going to be used toward salaries, to subsidize the chamber in any shape or form. It is strictly for marketing purposes. I just wanted to make sure that was understood. And once again, I would also appreciate, I think it's exciting. I'd like to see updates. I'd like to see what's being planned, what we have coming forward. So I think it would be great if we could get that monthly update.
Very good. All right. Alderman Levin.
I will be abstaining at the vote. I wanted to explain I am the immediate past chair of the Chamber of Commerce and sit on the board, so that when it comes around to voting, that is the reason for the abstention.
Okay. Before I call the roll, I also want to mention that they not only are pushing the Shop Local campaign, but they also practice what they preach. The identity folks that were hired to put this together were, I believe, Desert Rose Design, which is a local Elmhurst-based design firm. And so kudos to Jen to keeping that local as we always try to do. So with that, it is clerk. Actually, this is a report. We can do this by voice vote. All in favor, you could say aye, please.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right. I say, we have one noted as to the record, one abstention. Alderman Levin.
Yes.
That report passes. On to item 7, committee reports. Clerk Spencer, if you could please read recommendation A, please. And I would also, before Clerk Spencer reads the recommendation, Chairman Morley asked that when we do talk about entertain discussion on these next 3 items, he will more than likely talk about all 3 because they really are intertwined. So I just want to be, for the record, we will be discussing accordingly. So Clerk Spencer, if you could please read the recommendation.
It is therefore the recommendation of the Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee that the City Council approve inducement resolutions for the 3 potential TIF redevelopment areas of North York Street, York and Villette, and Riverside Drive. The draft inducement resolutions are attached for your review. Respectfully submitted, Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee, signed by Stephen Morley, Chair, Danny Polumsky, Vice Chair, Norman Leader, Alderman, 2nd Ward.
Thank you, Clerk Spencer. And for the record, we will be voting on these individually, but as a discussion, Chairman Morley will more than likely talk about all 3 items. At this time, I'd ask for entertaining a motion and a second to put item 7A on the floor, please. Chairman Morley with the motion. Second, Vice Chairman Polumsky. Discussion. Chairman Morley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bear with me. I think it's very important, and I've said this numerous times during the multiple meetings that we have, that we make sure we dot every I and cross every T as it relates to the consideration of TIFs or any TIF districts. So what I wanted to do, and I talked to City Manager Storino and the Mayor, all 3 of these under committee reports. Certainly putting 7A before us on the table allows us, or in front of us allows us to discuss it, but they are all intertwined. So I will be kind of giving the council a history of everything that the committee has gone through up until this point, discussing the relevance of each one of these, and then ultimately we can vote individually, and I'd certainly be more than welcome or happy to answer any questions individually. As it relates to TIFs, tax increment financing, just a little bit of a history as it relates to these TIFs that we're talking about. Way back when in 2009, the city had been working on for several years the comprehensive plan, which everyone should have a copy of. We all approved, signed, et cetera. And within that comprehensive plan, 9 separate sub-areas were identified as potential areas to look at for development. So that's really where the root of this started. Then the EEDC actually took first crack, and ultimately I think the City Council approved, with the EEDC's recommendation, the hiring of Kane McKenna, or someone to review possible TIF areas in town. That resulted in a preliminary draft that we were issued on May 31st of this year, this big heavy packet that we were all issued an executive summary, and subsequently we were all sent an electronic copy of the full version. What this did is we actually took the 9 sub-areas, this pared it down to 5, and did kind of a 35,000 feet review of the 5 potential areas that we could consider for economic development and what possible economic development alternatives would be available. That's how this actually came to our committee, and we started discussing TIFs. We actually had Kane McKenna in, and I think in addition to the committee here, a couple other aldermen, I know specifically Alderman Levin, attended at least one of the 2 separate meetings we had. One was what I'll call a TIF 101 process. We actually haven't put forward a TIF in this town. The newest TIF, if you will, is 1996. That's quite some time ago. So we had Kane McKenna, an expert in this field, walk us through what I'll say was TIF 101, the process of what we need to do if we're considering a TIF. During that time, they actually gave us, they also walked us through any of the changes that have happened in the last 15, 20 years as it relates to TIFs and any of the potential changes that are coming through legislation. They also gave us what I would consider a generic timeline to give us an idea of how long TIFs take from the beginning to the end, at least until this council would vote whether to approve a TIF or not. I can tell you right now that in its most expeditious fashion, a TIF, a complete TIF district would not get approved in this town for 4 to 6 months. It's quite a thorough process. There's several dates and times that are mandated by law after you post certain things, so there's really no way to rush this. In addition to having Kane McKenna in, I'm very pleased to say that from City Attorney Storino's law office, they have a TIF expert who actually came in and talked about the actual next steps and any actual recommendations he would have as it relates to considering any TIFs. What was interesting is we had been talking about on committee, chicken or the egg. When do you do this? How do you do this? What happens if a developer comes before? Because this is in the paper. And Mr. Baugh, who's an expert TIF attorney, said, I recommend to anybody who is even considering a TIF to pass an inducement resolution. That's 7A. That's where we are right now. To pass an inducement resolution. What that inducement resolution does is basically it allows the city to establish a date and time. No more, no less. It allows the city to establish a date and time which allows for maximum flexibility should in the future we approve a TIF for that area. Basically what this does is just part of the process that if we establish, it'll be a recommendation out of our committee tonight, and theoretically it passes, it goes on to a resolution, that establishes a date where it allows for maximum flexibility where potentially the city could recoup some of its costs we're expending right now as we look into this, whether it be attorneys or experts or consultants. In addition, it also allows for some flexibility for the business community should anybody in the business community be considering any sort of development in any one of these TIF areas we're considering. It allows them to potentially recoup some of those costs they could have incurred during this time. In this resolution, or in the report, and you'll see attached is a draft of the resolution that we would vote on next week if it passes, or 2 weeks from now if it passes. We have to establish a dollar amount, a recommended dollar amount. In this case, both the expert and the attorney expert and the consultant both recommended $10 million. It does not obligate the city at all to spend that $10 million. It does not give the city authority to spend that $10 million. By law, you're required to put a dollar amount in there. Now, you don't want to put some ridiculous dollar amount like $3 billion in there. You're supposed to make your best effort to estimate what the dollar amount should be. And the expert and the consultant both said $10 million is a fair number to put in that. But to reiterate, it does not obligate the city to spend this money, nor does it obligate or give the city authority to spend this money. It's just a date and time when people can start capturing their receipts if potentially 6 to 8 months down the road when this comes to fruition, if we vote it up or down. If we vote it up, it just allows for maximum flexibility for the city and truly allows for the best opportunity for that TIF to succeed. So I believe it's the prudent action to take as it relates to this inducement resolution. The part and parcel of that is a feasibility resolution, and you may have read it in the study, in the preliminary report. A feasibility resolution is actually a formal declaration or a formal action by this body that obligates, in this case, our own Patty Spencer. Section 4 under the draft says the city clerk or her designee is authorized and directed to immediately send a copy of this resolution to all taxing districts that would be affected by the designation of the property as a redevelopment project area. In conversation in the committee, we've talked about being as open and transparent as possible. Now, this feasibility resolution, all it does is obligates the city to tell any taxing body that potentially could be affected by this that we're considering it. Doesn't obligate it for any more than that. In addition, it's important to note that this is not required by law. It's required by law if you're displacing, I forget the term, 10 dwellings or 10 dwellers. If you're replacing residential and possibly tiffing residential and could impact people's homes, then you're actually obligated to pass this feasibility resolution. But when the committee discussed, with regard to open and transparent, when the committee discussed the feasibility resolution, even though we're not obligated to do so, we thought it was a good idea because it does formally require the city, Patty Spencer, to send this resolution to all taxing bodies, letting them know that we're considering this. It's a formal action that allows us to notify the other taxing bodies. And then finally, as part of this process, and really part and parcel to feasibility resolution, is what's called a feasibility or eligibility study. And that's the last thing that we're looking at. It's basically, we're as a committee saying that we have reviewed every piece of information that we can so far. We don't have any additional information that we can review to move any further. What we need to do is hire somebody to proceed with phase one of the feasibility. And what phase one does is a number of things, but basically what it does is it gives the committee and ultimately the council more tools, more data to evaluate and decide whether or not we want to proceed forward, including review of characteristics of the project area, prepare a presentation for incremental revenue projections, prepare financing alternatives, establish the map and identify the parcels within the map. At the very minimum, it will establish the preliminary project boundaries and prepare a survey analysis and identify documentation to back up the findings. Basically, it's the next step in the process. Out of all of these three things that we're discussing tonight, this is the only portion that authorizes the city to spend any money at all, and that is to pay for phase one, a phase one review of 3 different areas. We as a committee discussed the 9, then the 5, then we ranked the 5 areas into the top, we ranked them 1 by 5 and discussed it with Kane McKenna, the consultants. It was the committee's opinion that we should move forward with a feasibility phase one review for 3 specific TIF areas, those being North York, Riverside Drive, and the York and Villette areas. We actually get a discount from the consultant if we do 3 at once. We can save, I mean, it really depends. The report and ultimately the contract will authorize for a spend of up to $24,000. The consultant said that, due to efficiencies by establishing or reviewing all 3 at once, the city's going to save about $5,000 to $10,000 as it relates to this. The other thing to note is that there is a proposal letter from Kane McKenna outlining what they want to do. This is merely for reference, much like most of the consultants or contractors we work with, ultimately it's going to be a city contract written up by our attorney. So that is simply for reference. You know, the city attorney knows what our desires and wants are as it relates to contracts, and those will be there for your full review. And that is really the process and where we are right now. So a quick recap, the inducement resolution merely allows for maximum financial flexibility by the city. The feasibility resolution, although not required, does obligate the city to formally inform any taxing bodies that we are considering this, nothing more, considering it. And then the authorization for Kane McKenna is really for this city to, for this committee to continue to do its job and get more information and review it. One thing I want to be very clear, because it seems like whenever TIFs come about, there's a lot of talk. I want to be very clear on this. The Development Planning and Zoning Committee has not approved any new TIF districts at this time. These are steps 1, 2, and 3 out of 100. This process takes 4 to 6 months or more. I repeat, we have not approved or endorsed 0, 1, 2, or 3 TIF districts. This is just part of the process. And Mr. Chairman, I think that wraps it up. I'd be happy to answer any questions, if you're still awake, as it relates to any of these TIFs.
Chairman Worley, we appreciate your explanation. Very well done. Alderman Levin has a question.
Well, I did sit in on the TIF 101, and it's a very, since we haven't done a TIF for some time, it's very important to do that. And I talked to Chairman Morley today and suggested that somewhere soon along the line it would be a good idea to do TIF 101 for the entire council, so that also the people in the community could have a good understanding of what TIFs are. They can be a very emotional issue, and so if people want to speak for or against them, then we'll have all the information we need to understand them. And so whether that's as a committee of the whole, I would suggest for the future. Chairman Morley took a good amount of time to go through it, because I personally don't know which TIFs I would support. I do feel there's a number of steps that have to be taken beyond this, and he has assured me, as he assured all of us tonight, that these are very preliminary steps, and I'm convinced that these are the right steps to take at this time, and I would support that motion.
Thank you, Alderman Morley.
Quick follow-up. As a result of my conversation with Alderman Levin, I have had a conversation with the mayor, exchanged emails with Chief Kopp and City Manager Grabowski, and discussed it with Marilyn Gaston, that sometime in the next 2 meetings, let's say when it's appropriate and when timing allows, we'll do a TIF 101 TIF update type of presentation for the council.
Very well done. I think that's an excellent idea, and because half of, I think, 90% of TIF is just understanding how it works, and I think if people understand it, they'll be a lot more educated on it, and based on that, they'll be able to make a better decision. Other questions or discussion? Alderman Dunn.
I was listening to Alderman Morley give an update on the history of the TIFs, and we had 3 done in the past, and about 1 every 5 to 7, 8 years, and we're going to hit 3 of them in 6 months. Fast track those. I did attend part of the TIF 101 session, the first one. Did Kane McKenna describe the steps that they'd be able to allow us to have enough bandwidth to properly manage 3 at once, whereas we've generally only attacked 1 every 5 years or so?
Chairman Morley.
We did discuss a little bit about the capacity and doing multiple TIFs at once. The general, actually not the general feeling, the answer was that many towns do multiple TIFs at once. It's not something that should preclude you from doing it should you decide that these TIFs are what you want to do. But back to my original point, we haven't decided to do 1, 2, or 3. Basically what we're doing is reviewing these in parallel, and when we get to the end, we'll figure out whether we're doing 0, 1, 2, or 3. So they did touch on that a little bit, but that's part of that feasibility study where We have as much information as we have to get this far. You know, we're looking for some more of the nuts and bolts, including the financials for the feasibility study.
Very good. Thanks, Chairman. Alderman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Chairman Morley, for your summary on the many meetings that were had in regards to the TIF discussion. I as well, I don't think I was at the TIF 101 discussion, but I've been talking about TIFs for a very long time at this point. But I was at some of the meetings discussing the TIFs. I don't know if it's really a question or more of a comment or a mixture of both here, is that I do understand that what is being proposed, and for those in the audience who don't have this nice thick document in front of them like we do, each of these proposed TIFs already have a proposed boundary for each of them. During the preliminary, phase 1 study, if you would, it seems to allude to the fact that that is the boundary that is going to be looked at during that phase for each of these proposed TIFs. Now, mind you, I do understand that it could shrink, obviously, from coming out of that determination, but is there any consideration, or is Kane McKenna looking at any potential increase in size if they find necessary, if they find the need to suggest, recommend, not saying that we as a council as a whole would agree with, but look past the boundaries that are set for each of the TIFs that we're about to study?
Chairman Morley.
What they discussed is they're going to take a close look at the rough boundaries that have been sketched out at this point, and they're going to look at each individual parcel. And when they do that, there certainly might be a shift, say across the street to grab a couple of parcels or two, or if when they take a close look they notice that this whole strip, maybe 4 parcels in a row are already developed, and that they may exclude those. So they're flexible in their review, and they're going to come back to us with the best recommendation. I wouldn't anticipate that the map itself is going to shift 6 blocks, but that's one of the primary reasons of phase 1 is to take a look at every single parcel on the tax roll and decide whether or not that boundary is where we want it to be, or it might be obvious, to your point, that right across the street there's 3 parcels that should be included.
Just to follow up to that, if I may, in regards to phase 1, I think that what we're doing, or what is being proposed that we do here with these 3 reports, is a very good thing. I think keeping the other government bodies in the loop, I know we have already had some preliminary discussions with them, but also formally with sending a copy to the resolution is a very important step in this procedure, even though it's not mandated by law. It's definitely something that I think we should communicate to all our government bodies so they are up to speed too and not surprised. But the last question is, in regards to phase 1, do we have any timeline or proposed timeline on when the phase 1 study, if this moves forward tonight, would be completed?
Chairman?
That's also a good question. I think that in the May document, at the very back was a proposed timeline that's roughly 24 weeks. We did ask Kane McKenna how long it would take. They kind of hedged their bets a little bit. I want to say that they said some of the work had been done already just prepping this, but my recollection is 4 to 6 weeks. Chief Cop, you were there in the meeting. I think it was 4 to 6 weeks for the preliminary, but they said don't hold that to us. Once we get started, let's say 2 weeks into it, they'll give us a much better idea of what their timing is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman, and I also want to thank you for the referral and the TIF district to the north end that takes leadership to make things happen. And Alderman Pezza and Alderman Brown were referrals on that, and we appreciate your recommendation, and so where you get to see your good work pay off. Alderman,
thank you,
Pezza.
Thank you, Mayor. I just feel I need to make a few things clear from my standpoint regarding my support of these 3 items. I have to echo Alderman Morley once again that this inducement resolution, especially if passed in no way, shape, or form, gives authority for anyone to go out and spend $10 million tomorrow. nor do I believe it should be used as a vehicle to offer any incentives or to go out and hire more consultants or purchase land or do anything until, if it is approved, understand this is merely a tool. I like to look at it as a cover our back for reimbursement tool. If added expenses are incurred, that this council approves first. So that is my understanding of how that would work. And I also want to state that my support of any of these three agreements no way states at this time that I personally support or don't support either any or any of them. I just believe that these resolutions express my support to move forward, to retrieve the necessary information needed to make that decision. And we need to choose wisely whether or not and where these new TIFs should be applied, and I think these steps are necessary to help us form that decision. So I do support these.
Well said, Alderman. Any other questions or discussion? Okay. Hearing none, I'd ask, actually, these are reports. We can probably do these by voice vote. On item A, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, say no. Report 7A passes. Recommendation 7B, Clerk Spencer, if you could please read the recommendation.
It is therefore the recommendation of the Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee that the City Council approve feasibility resolutions for the three potential TIF redevelopment areas of North York Street, York and Villette, and Riverside Drive. The draft feasibility study resolutions are attached for your review. Respectfully submitted, Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee, signed by Stephen Morley, Chair, Danny Polumsky, Vice Chair, Norman Leader, Alderman, 2nd Ward.
Thank you, Clerk. And at this time, I ask for a motion and a second. Chairman Morley with a second from Vice Chair Polumsky. Discussion. I think we've kind of had the discussion. So we lump the three together. Hearing none, I'd ask for a voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Ayes have it. And the report 7B passes. On to item 7C, recommendation. Please, Clerk Spencer, if you may.
It is therefore the recommendation of the Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee that the City Council approve a resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement by and between the City of Elmhurst and Kane McKenna and Associates, Inc., regarding the eligibility studies for the three potential TIF redevelopment areas of North York Street, York and Villette, and Riverside Drive at a cost not to exceed $24,000. The resolution is attached for your review. Respectfully submitted, Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee, signed by Stephen Morley, Chair, Danny Polumsky, Vice Chair, and Norman Leader, Alderman, 2nd Ward.
Thank you, Clerk. And that motion by Chairman Morley, second by Alderman Polumsky. Discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. The report passes. Right. And moving along here, item 8, reports and recommendations of appointed and elected officials. I do want to mention that we are going to have a committee of the whole meeting after this, so I'm going to save most of my comments for that because they are comment related. Really, that's pretty much it for me because most of the comments I'm going to have are going to be for the committee of the whole. So, any questions or any reports or recommendations from anyone else on the dais here? And status of progress of Stormwater Comprehensive Plan, Mike Kopp, any updates there?
Yeah, first I want to say that the mayor, myself, and City Manager Grabowski met with the subcommittee chairman last Monday night. It was a great meeting. We want to thank the chairman and all the task force members for their patience so far. And as more information comes forward, they'll be directed to the chairs and the rest of the committee, and we'll work forward with that. On the sanitary side, computer models are in the process of being developed. They're starting to incorporate some of the smoke testing data, and they're doing more additional, as you know, was approved a couple weeks ago, and they'll continue to work on that. It should be completed by the end of September if weather permits. Once the smoke testing's done, the models will be completed, and they'll start coming up with some alternative analysis. The one thing I want to note on task 5 on the Gantt chart, it looks like that they're behind on that task, but what they really need is that additional smoke testing information to finish that task. So once that's done, they'll quickly be back on schedule. On the stormwater side, the hydraulic models for the tensed areas have been developed. Computer models for improvement have been completed. They've determined the proposed levels of flood protection for alternatives, and all tasks are on schedule right now. That's all.
Thank you, City Manager Kopp. And on to item 9, other business. Any other business? Alderman Plumsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know everyone up here wants to see some significant improvements in our power supply. We may have different approaches, but I think we all recognize that we have some real problems here in Elmhurst. Tonight, our Alderman Healy, Kennedy, Morley, York, and myself would like to announce the launch of a website with the purpose of gathering signatures to let ComEd know that we demand more reliability and accountability in our power supply. And I'd encourage everyone to visit www.powerelmhurst.com to offer their signatures. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Plumsky. Anybody else for other business? Announcements. Alderman Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to make an announcement that the 7th Ward is going to be having a 7th Ward meeting October 19th. It's a Wednesday. It's going to be from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., and it'll be at the Community Bank of Elmhurst at Spring and Butterfield at the 2nd level.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Clerk Spencer, with the hand. Always doing good things.
I wanted to announce that there's an electronic recycling coming in October to Elmhurst. It's sponsored by Elmhurst College, and it's Saturday, October 1st, from 9 to noon at the college, the parking lot at the corner of Park and Maple. That's north of the Mill Theater.
Thank you.
And I also just wanted to say, the census has come in, and Elmhurst has increased by 1,359 residents. So our total is 44,121 residents. And the clerk's office received a plaque for recognition for the city, a thank you to the city, because we raised so much awareness and inspired participation to our residents that our town helped the count for the 2010 census be accurate. So I thought that was worth mentioning.
Thanks, Clerk Spencer. Anyone else? All right. I want to give a shout out to our York football team who won homecoming against Oak Park over the weekend, 35-7. And for those concerned, quarterback Luca, who came out with a pretty nasty injury, is okay and well. So, and we wish him the best. So, congratulations to the York Dukes, 35-7. I'm going to be with some Oak Park guys tomorrow, like Senator Harmon. So I'm going to give him a razz him a little bit. So, anybody else for announcements? Hearing none, I'd ask a motion for adjournment. Alderman Morley, seconded by Alderman Wagner. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. In about 2 minutes, take a little break. We're going to